The mansion was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence that comes with contentment, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that wraps around a person until they can barely breathe. Thomas Bradford sat in his leather chair, staring at the Christmas tree his assistant had arranged 3 weeks ago. It stood 15 feet tall in the grand living room, covered in white lights and crystal ornaments that probably cost more than most people's cars. But as Thomas looked at it now on Christmas Eve, all he could see was something cold and lifeless. He was 52 years old. He owned 3 restaurants, 2 hotels, and more real estate than he could count. His bank account had more zeros than most people could imagine. Yet here he sat, completely alone, in a house so big that his footsteps echoed through the halls. No family was coming for dinner. No friends were stopping by with gifts. His phone sat on the table beside him, dark and silent. He couldn't remember the last time someone had called him just to talk, just to see how he was doing. The truth hit him hard in that moment. He had spent 30 years building an empire, and in the process he had forgotten to build a life. Every relationship had been transactional. Every friendship had been about business. Even his marriage years ago had ended because his wife told him she felt like just another asset he was managing. She had wanted love. He had given her a bigger house. Thomas stood up and walked through room after room. The formal dining room with a table that could seat 20. The game room with a pool table no one had played on in years. The home theater where he watched movies alone. The guest rooms that never had guests. Each space was decorated perfectly, expensively, and completely without warmth. This was the most unsettling truth of his life. He had everything and it meant nothing. He grabbed his coat and left the mansion, unable to bear another minute in that beautiful, terrible emptiness. The streets were quieter than usual as he drove downtown. Most people were home with their families, wrapping last-minute gifts, preparing Christmas dinner, laughing together. Thomas drove past lit-up windows showing happy scenes he couldn't be part of. The loneliness felt like a physical weight on his chest. He pulled up to his flagship restaurant, the Sterling Room. At least here, surrounded by the kitchen staff working late and the few customers who had nowhere else to go, he wouldn't feel so alone. Or so he thought. Have you ever felt so alone that you couldn't breathe, even when surrounded by everything money could buy? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything and helps us share more stories of hope and love. Thomas Bradford had not always been alone. Once, many years ago, he had been a young man with big dreams and an even bigger heart. He came from a working-class family in Ohio, where his father worked at a factory and his mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Sunday dinners around their small kitchen table were filled with laughter and stories. His mother would make pot roast and his father would tell jokes that weren't really funny, but they all laughed anyway because being together made everything good. But Thomas had wanted more. Not just for himself but for his parents too. He wanted to give them a better life, to show them that their sacrifices had meant something. So he worked 3 jobs while going to college, studying business and finance until his eyes burned from exhaustion. He graduated top of his class and immediately started working at an investment firm in New York City. The city changed him. Success came quickly, but it demanded everything. 80-hour work weeks. Missing holidays. Canceled plans. His girlfriend from college, a sweet woman named Rebecca, had waited for 2 years before finally telling him she couldn't do it anymore. She wanted a partner, not someone who only had time for spreadsheets and conference calls. His parents passed away within a year of each other when Thomas was 35. His mother went first, her heart giving out suddenly one Tuesday morning. His father followed 6 months later. The doctor said it was a stroke, but Thomas knew better. His father had died of a broken heart, unable to live without the woman he had loved for 40 years. Thomas threw himself into work even harder after that. Building his business became his only purpose. He bought his first restaurant at 38, turning a failing establishment into a 5-star destination within 2 years. Then came the second restaurant, then the hotels, then the real estate investments. Money poured in. His name appeared in business magazines. People called him a genius, a visionary. But who was there to celebrate with? Who cared when he closed a big deal or when he won an award? He would return to his increasingly larger homes, houses that went from nice to impressive to obscenely huge, and there was never anyone waiting for him. He tried dating, of course. Beautiful women who were attracted to his wealth. But Thomas could always sense that they loved what he had, not who he was. The conversations felt empty. The relationships felt fake. He married once at 45, to a woman named Patricia who seemed different at first. She talked about wanting a family, about building a real life together. Thomas believed her. The marriage lasted 3 years. Patricia had enjoyed the lifestyle, the vacations, the jewelry, the status of being Mrs. Thomas Bradford. But she had not enjoyed Thomas himself. She told him the day she left that living with him was like living with a ghost. He was physically present but emotionally absent. He worked constantly, and when he wasn't working he was thinking about work. She said she felt invisible. After the divorce, Thomas stopped trying. He convinced himself that he was better off alone, that relationships were distractions, that his work was enough. But deep down, in quiet moments he tried to avoid, he knew the truth. He was desperately, achingly lonely. Now, on this Christmas Eve, sitting in his mansion that cost $12 million, Thomas could no longer ignore what his life had become. The decorations his assistant arranged felt like a mockery. She had done exactly what he paid her to do, made everything look perfect, but there was no soul in it. No memories being made. No love filling the spaces between the expensive furniture. He walked to his home office and looked at the photos on his desk. His parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful. Him as a little boy, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting between them. Those were the last real family photos he had. Everything after that was professional headshots and publicity photos for business magazines. Thomas picked up the photo of his parents and felt tears sting his eyes. What would they think of him now? They had been so proud when he made his first million. They had cried happy tears when he bought them a nice house in a safe neighborhood. But would they be proud of this? Of their son, rich beyond measure, sitting alone on Christmas Eve with no one who truly loved him? The question hurt too much to answer. Thomas set the photo down and left the office. He wandered through the house one more time as if searching for something he couldn't name. The kitchen, huge and modern, where a chef came 3 times a week to prepare meals Thomas ate alone. The library filled with books he never had time to read. The pool room with the indoor pool he never swam in. Every room told the same story. A man who had gained the whole world but lost himself in the process. Finally, Thomas couldn't take it anymore. He had to get out, had to go somewhere, anywhere but here. He grabbed his coat, a thick wool one that cost more than his father had made in a month, and headed for the garage. His cars sat in a neat row, each one pristine and barely driven. He chose the Mercedes, the one that didn't scream wealth quite as loudly as the others. The drive downtown gave him time to think. Christmas lights decorated the streets, and through windows he could see families gathered together. A father lifting a small child to place a star on a tree. A couple dancing in their living room to music he couldn't hear. Teenagers laughing around a dinner table. Simple moments that meant everything. Thomas gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced himself to look away. Those scenes weren't for him. He had made his choices and now he had to live with them. The Sterling Room was his first restaurant, the one that started everything. He still loved the place even though he had managers who ran it now. Something about being there, in the space where his dreams had first taken shape, gave him a sense of purpose. Tonight, even though it was Christmas Eve, he knew the kitchen staff would be there. The restaurant closed early on the holiday, but prep work for Boxing Day events meant a few people would be around. Thomas parked in his reserved spot behind the building and walked to the entrance. The cold December air bit at his face and he pulled his coat tighter. The street was mostly empty, just a few cars passing by and some people hurrying to get wherever they needed to be. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The dining room was dark except for the ambient lighting they always left on. The tables were set for tomorrow, white linens crisp and perfect. The place smelled like pine from the garland wrapped around the bar and the small tree in the corner. "Mr. Bradford?" A voice called from the kitchen. His head chef, Antoine, appeared in the doorway. "I didn't expect to see you tonight. Just needed to get out of the house," Thomas said, trying to sound casual. "How's prep going for tomorrow?" Good. We'll be ready." Antoine studied him with concerned eyes. The chef had worked for Thomas for 10 years and knew him well enough to see through the casual act. "You want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "That would be great, thanks." Thomas sat at the bar while Antoine disappeared back into the kitchen. He looked around the restaurant, remembering the first night they had opened. He had been so nervous, so excited, so hopeful. He had believed that success would bring happiness. He had been wrong. Antoine returned with 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside Thomas. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment. "You shouldn't be alone on Christmas," Antoine finally said. "Neither should you," Thomas replied. "I'm not. My wife and kids are at her sister's place across town. I'll join them in an hour when we finish here." Antoine paused. "Where's your family, Mr. Bradford?" The question was simple, but it cut deep. Thomas didn't know how to answer without revealing just how empty his life had become. He took a long sip of coffee, using the moment to compose himself. "Don't have any," he said simply. Antoine looked at him with something like pity, which made Thomas feel even worse. He didn't want pity. He didn't want sympathy. He just wanted for one night to not feel so completely alone. The sound of the front door opening made both men turn. Thomas frowned. The restaurant was closed. The locked sign was clearly visible. Who would be trying to come in now? What he saw when he looked toward the entrance would change everything. A woman stood in the doorway, backlit by the street lamps outside. She held the hand of a little girl who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Both of them wore coats that had seen better days, thin and worn, barely adequate for the bitter cold of late December. "I'm so sorry," the woman said quickly, her voice shaking slightly. "I saw the lights and thought maybe you were still open. We just need to warm up for a few minutes. We'll leave right away." Thomas stood up from the bar, taking in the scene more clearly now. The woman was beautiful, with smooth dark skin and eyes that held both exhaustion and determination. She wore her hair in a ponytail, practical and simple. Her coat, dark blue and fraying at the edges, hung loose on her frame. The little girl beside her looked up at her mother with complete trust, even though her lips had a slight blue tinge from the cold. "We're not open," Antoine started to say, but Thomas held up a hand to stop him. "Come in," Thomas said, moving toward them. "Please come in and warm up." The woman hesitated, and Thomas could see the pride warring with necessity in her expression. The little girl shivered, and that seemed to make the decision for her. She stepped inside, pulling her daughter with her. "Thank you," the woman said softly. "We won't stay long, I promise." Thomas closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold. Up close he could see more details. The woman's clothes were clean but old. Her daughter wore jeans with patches on the knees and a red sweater that might have been bright once but had faded from many washings. Both of them carried small backpacks, stuffed full of what Thomas assumed were their belongings. "I'm Thomas," he said, offering his hand. The woman looked at it for a moment before shaking it. Her grip was firm despite the cold that had stiffened her fingers. "I'm Candace. This is my daughter, Riley." "Hi," Riley said quietly, still standing close to her mother. "Why don't you both sit down?" Thomas gestured to a table near the gas fireplace they kept in the dining room for ambience. He walked over and turned it on, the flames flickering to life immediately. "Antoine, could you bring them some hot chocolate?" "Right away, Mr. Bradford." Candace and Riley moved to the table, but Thomas could see the tension in Candace's shoulders. She sat on the edge of her chair, ready to bolt at any moment. Riley, however, immediately held her hands out toward the fire, her small face lighting up with relief as the warmth reached her. "This is nice," Riley said, looking around the restaurant with wide eyes. "It's so fancy." Candace put her hand on her daughter's shoulder, a gentle warning to mind her manners. "Riley, don't." "It's fine," Thomas said, sitting across from them. "It is fancy. We try to make it special for our customers." Antoine returned with 3 mugs of hot chocolate, each topped with whipped cream. He set them on the table with a gentle smile. "Made them extra special for our guests." "Thank you," Candace said, her voice thick with emotion. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug as if it were precious. Riley immediately took a sip, getting whipped cream on her nose, which made her giggle. Thomas found himself smiling at the sound. When was the last time he had heard a child laugh? When was the last time such a simple thing had made him feel warm inside? "So," he said carefully, not wanting to pry but genuinely concerned, "what brings you two out on Christmas Eve?" Candace looked down at her hot chocolate, and Thomas saw her jaw tighten. She was fighting tears, he realized. Whatever had brought them here, it wasn't good. "We're just passing through," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion he could see in her eyes. "Looking for a place to stay warm until morning." It was a lie, or at least not the full truth. Thomas had spent years in business learning to read people, to see what they weren't saying. Candace and Riley weren't just passing through. They had nowhere to go. "Mommy lost her job," Riley said suddenly, her child's honesty cutting through her mother's attempt at privacy. "And then we had to leave our apartment because we couldn't pay the rent man. But Mommy says it's going to be okay because we're strong and we have each other." "Riley?" Candace's voice held a warning but also defeat. The truth was out and there was no taking it back. Thomas felt something crack open in his chest. Here was real pain, real struggle, not the self-inflicted loneliness he had been wallowing in all night. This woman and her daughter were facing actual hardship, and yet there was a light in Riley's eyes, a faith in her mother that spoke of love stronger than any circumstance. "How long have you been without a place to stay?" Thomas asked gently. Candace met his eyes and he saw the moment she decided to trust him at least a little. 3 days. We stayed at a shelter the first night, but it was full after that. We've been walking around during the day, going to libraries and coffee shops, anywhere warm. At night She paused, glancing at Riley. We find places. The weight of what she was saying hit Thomas hard. This woman and her child had been sleeping on the streets. In December. In weather cold enough to be dangerous. And she had been doing everything in her power to protect her daughter, to keep moving, to stay strong. What kind of work did you do? Thomas asked. I was an administrative assistant at a law firm. They downsized 3 months ago. Candace straightened her shoulders, and Thomas recognized that pride again. I've been applying everywhere, but it's been hard without a permanent address. And the holidays mean most places aren't hiring right now. I can help, Thomas said immediately. No. Candace's response was quick and firm. Thank you, but we don't need charity. We just needed to warm up. We'll be fine. Thomas understood that kind of pride. He had felt it himself once, back when he was young and struggling. But he also understood something else. Sometimes pride could be dangerous, especially when a child's safety was involved. It's Christmas Eve, he said carefully. And I own this restaurant. The building upstairs has an apartment that I use sometimes when I work late. It's empty tonight. You and Riley could stay there at least for the holiday. No strings attached. Candace stared at him, clearly torn. She wanted to refuse. He could see it in her eyes. But Riley had stopped drinking her hot chocolate and was watching her mother with hopeful anticipation. Please, Mommy, Riley whispered. I'm so tired. And there it was. The moment when a mother's love overrode her pride. Candace looked at her daughter, at the exhaustion in her young face, at the way she was still shivering even with the fire nearby. Then she looked back at Thomas. Just for tonight, she said quietly. Just for tonight, Thomas agreed, even though he was already planning more. Antoine, who had been watching from a respectful distance, caught Thomas's eye and nodded with approval. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned a few minutes later with plates of food, simple but warm and filling. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Can't have you two going to bed hungry on Christmas Eve, Antoine said with a warm smile. This time, Candace didn't refuse. She and Riley ate with the kind of hunger that told Thomas it had been a while since they had a proper meal. He watched them, this mother and daughter who had each other and so very little else, and felt something shift inside him. His loneliness suddenly seemed like such a small thing compared to what they were facing. He had been sitting in his mansion feeling sorry for himself, while out in the cold, real people were struggling with real problems. People who needed help. People who could use what he had to offer. For the first time in years, Thomas felt like maybe his wealth could actually mean something. Not just numbers in a bank account or properties on a portfolio, but actual good in the world. Actual help for people who needed it. After they finished eating, Thomas led Candace and Riley upstairs to the apartment above the restaurant. It was small compared to his mansion, just a bedroom, bathroom and living area, but it was warm and safe and had a comfortable bed. The bathroom is through there, Thomas said, pointing. There are clean towels in the closet. Help yourself to anything you need. Riley ran to the bed and bounced on it once, then twice, her face breaking into a huge grin. It's so soft, Mommy. Candace watched her daughter with tears in her eyes. When she looked at Thomas, her expression was a mix of gratitude and something else he couldn't quite identify. Shame, maybe, or discomfort at needing help. Thank you, she said. You don't know what this means to us. I'm glad I could help, Thomas replied honestly. He pulled out his wallet and took out his business card. If you need anything, my cell number is on here. Don't hesitate to call. Candace took the card, studying it for a moment. Thomas Bradford, CEO, Bradford Industries. She looked up at him with surprise. You're that Thomas Bradford? The billionaire. Thomas felt uncomfortable with the label suddenly. I guess I am. Why are you here? In your restaurant on Christmas Eve? Don't you have, I don't know, fancy parties to go to or something? It was a fair question, and Thomas found himself answering honestly. I don't have anywhere else to be. Understanding dawned in Candace's eyes. She nodded slowly, and in that moment Thomas felt like she actually saw him. Not the billionaire, not the business owner, but the lonely man underneath it all. Well, she said softly, thank you for sharing your Christmas Eve with us. Thomas left them there, going back downstairs where Antoine was cleaning up the kitchen. His chef looked at him with a knowing smile. That was a good thing you did, boss. It was nothing, Thomas said, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. It was something. Maybe the first real thing he had done in a very long time. He drove home to his empty mansion, but somehow tonight the loneliness didn't feel quite as heavy. Somewhere in the city, A mother and daughter were sleeping in a warm bed, safe and fed. And Thomas had been the one to make that happen. It was a start. Thomas woke up early on Christmas morning, earlier than usual. He lay in his massive bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about Candace and Riley. Were they awake yet? Had they slept well? Did Riley know it was Christmas? The thought hit him suddenly. Riley wouldn't have any presents. What kind of Christmas morning would that be for a little girl, waking up to nothing? Thomas threw off his covers and got dressed quickly. He drove to the one store he knew would be open early on Christmas, a 24-hour convenience store near his house. It wasn't much, but they had a small toy section. He grabbed what he could: a stuffed teddy bear, some coloring books and crayons, chocolate bars, a warm pink hat and glove set, and a few other small items. It wasn't the extravagant Christmas most children had, but it was something. He also stopped by a bakery he knew opened at 6 to serve early morning customers. He bought fresh pastries, fruit, and coffee. Then he drove to the Sterling room, letting himself in through the back entrance. The apartment was quiet when he climbed the stairs. He knocked softly on the door, not wanting to startle them. After a moment, he heard movement inside, and then Candace opened the door. She was wearing the same clothes as last night, her hair slightly messy from sleep. She looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Bradford? Is everything okay?" "I brought breakfast," Thomas said, holding up the bakery bag. "And a few things for Riley. It's Christmas after all." Candace's eyes widened when she saw the shopping bag in his other hand. For a moment he thought she might refuse, might tell him it was too much. But then Riley appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is that Santa?" Riley asked, her voice thick with sleep and hope. Thomas felt his heart twist. Of course a child would think that. What else would explain a stranger showing up with gifts on Christmas morning? "Santa had to make a special delivery," Candace said, her voice catching slightly. She looked at Thomas with tears in her eyes. "Come in, please." The three of them sat at the small table in the apartment's kitchenette. Riley opened her gifts with the kind of joy that only children can have, exclaiming over each item as if it were the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. The teddy bear was immediately named Mr. Fuzzy, and she hugged it tight while eating a chocolate croissant. "This is the best Christmas ever," Riley declared, completely sincere despite the difficult circumstances. Candace and Thomas exchanged glances over her head. The woman's eyes were wet with tears she was trying to hide, and Thomas felt something warm bloom in his chest. When was the last time he had made someone this happy? When was the last time a gesture had meant so much? After breakfast, while Riley played with her new coloring books, Thomas and Candace talked. She told him more about her situation, about how she had been a good employee at the law firm, never late, always professional, but budget cuts had meant letting go of junior staff. She talked about applying for jobs every day, about how hard it was without an address or clean professional clothes or even reliable internet access. "I've been using the library computers when I can," she said. "But it's hard to do interviews or follow up on applications when you don't have a phone that works consistently or a place to receive calls." "What kind of work do you want to do?" Thomas asked. Candace looked thoughtful. "I liked administrative work, but honestly, I'd do anything right now. I just need something stable. Something that would let me get Riley back into a normal life. She should be in school, playing with friends, not wandering around the city with me all day." Thomas made a decision in that moment. It wasn't even difficult. Here was a woman who wanted to work, who wanted to take care of her child, who just needed a chance. And he had the power to give her that chance. "I have a position available," he said, "at Bradford Industries. We need someone in our community outreach department. It's administrative work, but also involves coordinating with local organizations, setting up programs, that kind of thing. It pays $65,000 a year, plus full benefits." Candace stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" "I am. But you don't even know me. You haven't seen my resume or checked my references or—" "I know enough," Thomas interrupted gently. "I know you're a hard worker. I know you love your daughter and would do anything for her. I know you're honest and determined. That's more important than any resume. I don't understand why you're doing this." Candace's voice was quiet, almost suspicious. "People don't just help strangers like this. What do you want from me?" It was a fair question, and Thomas understood why she would ask it. In her position he would be suspicious too. "I don't want anything except to help," he said honestly. "Last night, when you and Riley came into the restaurant, I had been sitting there feeling sorry for myself, thinking about how empty my life is. And then I saw you two actually struggling with real problems, and it put everything in perspective. You reminded me that I have resources I can use to make a difference. So that's what I want to do." Candace studied his face for a long moment. Thomas let her look, let her search for any hint of deception or hidden motive. Finally, she seemed to find what she was looking for. "Okay," she said. "I accept. And thank you. Thank you so much." The relief and gratitude in her voice made Thomas feel better than any business deal ever had. This was real. This mattered. "You'll need a place to stay," he continued. "I own several apartment buildings in the city. There's a 2-bedroom unit available in one of the nicer neighborhoods, near a good elementary school for Riley. You can move in immediately. The rent can be deducted from your paycheck if you'd like." "Mr. Bradford." "Thomas. Please call me Thomas." "Thomas, this is too much. I can't accept all of this." "Yes, you can," Thomas said firmly but kindly. "Candace, you and Riley need help right now. I can provide that help. There's no shame in accepting it. Sometimes life knocks us down, and we need someone to give us a hand getting back up. Let me be that person for you." He watched the internal struggle play out on her face. Pride versus necessity. Independence versus reality. And then Riley came over, climbing into her mother's lap with Mr. Fuzzy clutched in her arms. "Mommy, I like Thomas," Riley said simply. "He's nice." That decided it. Candace wrapped her arms around her daughter and nodded at Thomas. "Okay. We accept. All of it. And I promise you I'll work harder than anyone else at your company. I'll prove that you made the right choice." "I already know I did," Thomas said. They spent the rest of Christmas Day together. Thomas took them to see the apartment, a bright 2-bedroom with large windows and a kitchen that made Candace gasp with delight. It was furnished simply but comfortably, and Riley immediately claimed the smaller bedroom as her own, spinning in circles with Mr. Fuzzy. Thomas made some calls and arranged for delivery of basics: sheets, towels, food for the kitchen, clothes for both Candace and Riley. He watched Candace's face as each delivery arrived, saw her gratitude mixed with disbelief that this was really happening. "I feel like Cinderella," she said at one point, laughing a little as she organized the clothes into the bedroom closet. "Like this is all going to disappear at midnight." "It's not disappearing," Thomas assured her. "This is real. Your new life is starting right now." In the late afternoon, Thomas ordered pizza for dinner. They sat in the new living room eating off paper plates and talking. Riley fell asleep on the couch halfway through, exhausted from the emotional day. Candace covered her with a blanket and then sat back down across from Thomas. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course. Why were you alone last night? Someone like you must have family, friends, people who want to spend Christmas with you." Thomas looked down at his slice of pizza, not really seeing it. "I have business associates, people who work for me, but actual friends or family? No. I spent so many years focused on building my company that I let everything else fall away. By the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late to get it back." "It's never too late," Candace said softly. "People can change. Lives can change. Look at us. 24 hours ago, Riley and I were sleeping on the street, and now we have a home and hope for the future. If that can happen, anything can happen." Her words struck something deep inside Thomas. She was right. Change was possible. He had spent so long believing his life was set, that he had made his choices and now had to live with them. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe he could choose differently going forward. "You're pretty wise," he said with a small smile. "Not really. Just optimistic. You have to be when you're a single mom. If I let myself get negative, I'd never get out of bed in the morning." She paused, then added, "Riley's father left when she was 2. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad, wasn't ready for the responsibility. So it's been just the 2 of us ever since." "His loss," Thomas said, meaning it. Candace smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you. For everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't think I can say it enough. You don't have to keep thanking me. Just, when you're back on your feet and stable again, maybe you can help someone else who needs it. That would be thanks enough." "I will. I promise." Thomas left the apartment that evening feeling lighter than he had in years. As he drove through the city, he thought about how much had changed in just one day. He had woken up that morning consumed by loneliness, and now he felt connected to something real. Connected to 2 people who needed him, yes, but also people who had reminded him of what really mattered in life. When he got back to his mansion, it didn't feel quite as empty. He sat in his living room looking at the perfect Christmas tree, and for the first time he thought about next year. Maybe next year this tree wouldn't stand in silence. Maybe next year there would be laughter and warmth filling these rooms. Maybe next year he wouldn't be alone. The week between Christmas and New Year passed quickly. Candace started her new position at Bradford Industries on December 28th, and Thomas made sure she had everything she needed. A company laptop, business cards, a proper orientation with HR. Her supervisor, Mrs. Patricia Chin, was a kind woman in her 50s who immediately took Candace under her wing. Thomas stopped by the community outreach department that first day wanting to check in. He found Candace at her desk, concentrating hard on something on her computer screen. She wore a blue blazer they had bought together at a department store 2 days earlier, her hair pulled back professionally, and she looked completely different from the desperate woman who had walked into his restaurant on Christmas Eve. "How's your first day going?" he asked. Candace looked up and smiled. "It's wonderful. A little overwhelming but good overwhelming. Mrs. Chun has been amazing and everyone here has been so welcoming." "I'm glad to hear it." Thomas leaned against the edge of her desk. "How's Riley adjusting to the apartment?" "She loves it. She's already made friends with a girl down the hall. And I enrolled her at Riverside Elementary. She starts on January 2nd. Candace's eyes got a little misty. "I can't believe this is real. A week ago we had nothing and now everything has changed." "You're doing great," Thomas said. "Really great." Over the next few days, Thomas found himself thinking about Candace and Riley often. He would be in a meeting and wonder if Riley was enjoying her new school supplies. He would be reviewing reports and think about whether Candace was settling in okay at work. It was strange, this feeling of being connected to someone else's life, but it was also nice. On New Year's Eve, Thomas made a decision. Instead of spending another holiday alone, he called Candace. "Hi," she answered, sounding slightly out of breath. "Sorry, I was chasing Riley around the apartment. She's hyper today. I wanted to ask if you and Riley would like to have dinner with me tonight. Nothing fancy, just a quiet celebration of the new year." There was a pause. "Are you sure? I mean, you probably have plans with your, other friends or—" "I don't," Thomas interrupted gently. "And I'd really like to spend the evening with you too. If you're comfortable with that." "Of course we are. Riley asks about you every day. She'd love to see you." That evening, Thomas picked them up at their apartment and drove them to a small Italian restaurant he knew, the kind of place that was family-owned and cozy. Riley chattered the entire drive, telling him about her new friend Jessica and how excited she was to start school and how Mr. Fuzzy slept with her every night. At dinner they talked like old friends. Thomas found himself laughing more than he had in years. Riley was hilarious, with the kind of unfiltered observations that only children make. When she asked him why he didn't have any kids of his own, Candace looked mortified, but Thomas just smiled. "I never found the right person to have kids with," he said honestly. "And then I got so busy with work that I kind of forgot about having a family." "That's sad," Riley said seriously. "Everyone should have a family." "You're right," Thomas agreed. "Everyone should." After dinner, they went back to Thomas's mansion so Riley could see it. Her reaction was everything he could have hoped for. She ran from room to room, exclaiming over the size and the decorations and the fact that he had a movie theater in his house. "Can we watch a movie?" she begged. "Riley, we've taken up enough of Thomas's time," Candace started to say. "I'd love to watch a movie," Thomas said quickly. "What do you want to see?" They ended up watching an animated film about a princess and a dragon. Riley sat between Thomas and Candace on the large theater couch, munching popcorn and providing running commentary on everything happening on screen. Thomas glanced over at Candace at one point and found her watching him with a soft expression. When their eyes met, she mouthed the words, "Thank you," and Thomas felt that warm feeling in his chest again. After the movie, Riley fell asleep on the couch, her head on her mother's lap. Candace gently stroked her daughter's hair, and Thomas saw such love in her face that it made his throat tight. "She's a great kid," he said quietly. "She's my whole world," Candace replied. "Everything I do, every decision I make, it's all for her. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She saved me in a lot of ways. When her father left, I was devastated. I thought my life was over. But then I looked at her, this tiny person who depended on me completely, and I knew I had to be strong. I had to keep going. She gave me purpose." Thomas thought about his own life, about how he had let work become his purpose. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. Meeting you and Riley changed something for me. I've been living in this empty way for so long, just going through the motions. But spending time with you too, seeing how much you love each other, how you take care of each other, it made me realize how much I've been missing. You didn't just need help from me. I needed help from you too. You reminded me what life is supposed to be about." Candace looked at him with understanding. "I think we helped each other. You gave us stability and hope. We gave you connection and purpose. That's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? People helping people, everyone lifting each other up. You're right, Thomas said. And I want to keep doing this. Not just helping you but helping others too. I have all these resources and I've been so selfish with them. I want to start using them to make a real difference. That would be amazing, Candace said warmly. And I can help. That's what my job is about, right? Community outreach. We can work together on this. They talked for hours, sitting in the theater with sleeping Riley between them. Thomas told Candace about his childhood, about his parents, about how he built his business. Candace told him about growing up in Chicago, about her dreams of becoming a social worker before life got in the way, about the struggles of being a single parent. I'm not saying it's easy, Candace said. There are days when I'm so tired I can barely think. Days when Riley is cranky and nothing makes her happy. Days when I wonder if I'm doing anything right. But then she'll smile at me or give me a hug or say something sweet, and I remember why it's all worth it. You're an amazing mother, Thomas said. Really? I mean that. I try. That's all any parent can do, right? Just try their best and hope it's enough. When Riley woke up around 11, they decided it was time to go. Thomas drove them back to their apartment, and as they were getting out of the car, Riley hugged him tight. I like you, she said simply. Can we see you again soon? Absolutely, Thomas promised. He watched them walk into their building, Candace holding Riley's hand, and felt something shift in his heart. He cared about them. Really cared. Not just because he was helping them but because they had become important to him. The realization was both wonderful and terrifying. Thomas had spent so long keeping people at a distance, protecting himself from hurt, that the idea of letting someone in felt dangerous. But it also felt right. He drove home thinking about the future. About how he wanted to be part of their lives, not just as a benefactor but as a friend. Maybe more than a friend, though that thought scared him. Candace was beautiful and kind and strong, everything he had always wanted but never thought he could have. But it was too soon for thoughts like that. They barely knew each other. Still, as Thomas lay in bed that night, listening to the silence of his big house, he found himself smiling. For the first time in years he was looking forward to tomorrow. January brought cold weather and new beginnings. Riley started school at Riverside Elementary and came home every day with stories about her teacher, Mrs. Anderson, and her new friends. Candace settled into her job, proving to be exactly as dedicated as she had promised. Thomas watched from a distance, checking in occasionally but trying not to hover. He was aware, very aware, that there was a power dynamic at play. He was Candace's employer and her landlord. He didn't want her to feel obligated to spend time with him or to accept his invitations out of some sense of duty. So he kept things professional at the office and tried to gauge her comfort level outside of work. But Candace seemed to have no such concerns. She called him one Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks into January, and asked if he wanted to come over for dinner. Nothing fancy, she said. Just spaghetti and salad. Riley has been asking when she'll see you again. Thomas's heart lifted. I'd love to. That evening became a regular thing. Every Saturday, Thomas would go to Candace and Riley's apartment for dinner. Sometimes they cooked together. Sometimes they ordered takeout. Always they talked and laughed and enjoyed each other's company. Thomas found himself sharing things with Candace that he hadn't told anyone in years. His regrets about his failed marriage. His guilt over not spending more time with his parents before they died. His fear that he had become someone his younger self wouldn't recognize. Candace listened without judgment, offering wisdom and perspective that surprised him with its depth. You can't change the past, she said one evening after Riley had gone to bed. They were sitting on her couch, drinking tea. But you can change what you do going forward. Every day is a chance to be better, to choose differently. I wasted so much time, Thomas said quietly. No, you used that time to become successful. That's not a waste. Now you have resources you can use to help people. Without those years of hard work, you couldn't do what you're doing now. Everything happens for a reason, even the hard stuff. Thomas looked at her, at this woman who had been homeless just weeks ago, who had every reason to be bitter or angry or broken, and yet somehow remained optimistic and kind. How do you stay so positive after everything you've been through? Because being negative doesn't help anything. It just makes life harder. Candace smiled at him. Besides, look at where I am now. I have a home, a job, food in my fridge, and my daughter is safe and happy. That's more than I could have dreamed of a month ago. I have so much to be grateful for. You have a good attitude, Thomas said. I have you, Candace replied simply. You changed our lives, Thomas. You gave us hope when we had none. That's not something I'll ever forget. The conversation shifted then, becoming more personal. They talked about hopes and dreams about what they wanted for the future. Candace talked about wanting to go back to school eventually, maybe get a degree in social work like she had always wanted. Thomas talked about his desire to make his company more socially responsible, to use his wealth for good. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation," he said. "Something focused on helping families in crisis. Providing housing assistance, job training, childcare support. The kind of help that can break the cycle of poverty." "That's a beautiful idea," Candace said, her eyes shining. "I could help you with that. My job in community outreach would be perfect for identifying needs and connecting with people who need assistance. Would you want to? It would mean more work, more responsibility." "I'd love to. Thomas, you gave me a second chance. I want to help give that to others." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming together. When Thomas finally left, driving home through the quiet city streets, he realized something. He wasn't just helping Candace anymore. She was helping him too. She was teaching him how to be a better person, how to use his resources meaningfully, how to connect with others in real and honest ways. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened. Thomas found excuses to stop by Candace's office during the day, bringing coffee or just checking in. She would text him funny things Riley said or send him pictures of projects they were working on. It felt natural, this growing closeness, like they had known each other for years instead of weeks. One evening in late January, Thomas took Candace and Riley ice skating at an outdoor rink downtown. Riley had never been skating before, and watching her wobble and slide across the ice, laughing even when she fell, made Thomas happier than any business success ever had. "Careful," Candace called out, staying close to her daughter. She wasn't much better on skates than Riley, and Thomas found himself helping both of them stay upright, holding their hands as they made their way around the rink. "This is fun," Riley declared after falling for the 10th time. "Even though I'm terrible at it." "You're not terrible," Thomas said, pulling her back to her feet. "You're learning. That's different." After skating, they got hot chocolate and sat on a bench watching other people skate. Riley sat between Thomas and Candace, swinging her legs and chattering about how she wanted to be a professional ice skater when she grew up, even though she had just learned the sport existed an hour ago. "You can be anything you want to be," Candace told her daughter. "As long as you work hard and never give up." "Is that how Thomas got rich?" Riley asked. "He worked hard. Very hard," Thomas confirmed. "Sometimes too hard. I forgot to do other important things while I was working." "Like what?" Riley asked with the curiosity of a child. "Like spending time with people I care about. Like having fun. Like enjoying life instead of just working all the time." Riley thought about this seriously. "Well, you're having fun now. So that's good." "You're right," Thomas said, smiling at her. "I'm having fun now. The most fun I've had in a very long time." He meant it. These simple evenings with Candace and Riley brought him more joy than any expensive vacation or luxury purchase ever had. Being with them felt like coming home to something he hadn't even known he was missing. As February approached, Thomas realized he was thinking about Candace constantly. Not just as a friend or someone he was helping, but as something more. The way she smiled at him across the dinner table. The sound of her laugh when he made a joke. The intelligence and kindness in her eyes when they talked about serious things. He was falling for her. Maybe had already fallen. The realization both thrilled and terrified him. But he couldn't say anything. Not yet. Candace had been through so much. She was still getting her life back on track. She needed stability and friendship, not romantic complications from her employer. So Thomas kept his feelings to himself and tried to be content with what they had. Still, he couldn't help wondering if she felt something too. Sometimes he caught her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Sometimes their hands would touch when they both reached for something, and she wouldn't pull away immediately. Sometimes, late at night when he was alone in his mansion, he let himself imagine what it would be like to tell her how he felt. To take a chance on something real. But for now he waited. Because Candace and Riley had brought light into his life, and he wasn't willing to risk losing that by pushing for more than they were ready to give. February turned into March, and spring began to peek through the last remnants of winter. Thomas had never been so aware of the changing seasons before. Every small sign of life returning to the world felt significant, mirroring the changes in his own life. The foundation Thomas had dreamed about was becoming a reality. He and Candace worked together on the planning, spending hours discussing how to structure it, what populations to serve, how to measure impact. Candace's insights, drawn from her own experiences, were invaluable. "We need to focus on dignity," she said during one of their planning sessions. "People in crisis don't just need money or housing. They need to be treated with respect, to feel like they matter." That's what you gave me. Not just material help but the sense that I was worth helping. Thomas took notes, his admiration for her growing with every conversation. She had transformed her pain into purpose, using what she had learned to help others. It was inspiring. The Bradford Foundation officially launched on March 15th with a public announcement and a press conference. Thomas stood at the podium explaining the mission and goals, but it was Candace who really brought the message home. She spoke about her own experience, about being homeless with her daughter, about the fear and desperation, and about how one person's kindness had changed everything. Thomas Bradford didn't just give me a job and a place to live, Candace said, her voice steady and clear. He gave me hope. He reminded me that there are good people in the world, people who care about strangers, people who use their resources to lift others up instead of just enriching themselves. That's what this foundation is about. That's what we're here to do. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. Media outlets ran stories about the billionaire and the single mother he had helped, and how they were now working together to help others. Thomas's phone rang constantly with people wanting to get involved or to contribute. But the best part was seeing the actual impact. Within the first month, the foundation helped 12 families find stable housing. They provided job training to 35 people. They connected single parents with childcare assistance and helped elderly residents with home repairs. Every success story felt personal to Thomas, reminded him of Candace and Riley and that Christmas Eve that had changed his life. Through it all, his relationship with Candace continued to deepen. They had become true partners, working together during the day and often spending evenings together as well. Riley had become like a daughter to him. She ran to hug him whenever she saw him, told him about her day at school, asked his opinion on everything from homework to what flavor ice cream was best. One Saturday in early April, Thomas taught Riley how to ride a bike in the park. Candace sat on a bench watching, her face glowing with happiness as she watched her daughter pedal shakily down the path with Thomas running alongside to catch her if she fell. "You're doing great," Thomas called out encouragingly. "Keep pedaling. Don't stop." Riley's face was a mix of concentration and pure joy. When she finally made it 20 feet without Thomas holding on, she screamed with delight. "I did it. I did it. Did you see Mommy?" "I saw, baby," Candace called back, wiping tears from her eyes. Later, as they sat on the grass eating sandwiches they had picked up from a deli, Riley fell asleep on the blanket, exhausted from her bike riding adventure. Thomas and Candace sat side by side watching her sleep. "She really loves you," Candace said softly. "She told me last week that she wishes you were her dad." Thomas's heart clenched. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you're the next best thing. That you care about her and will always be there for her, which is what really matters." "I will always be there for her," Thomas said, meaning it completely. "And for you." Candace looked at him, and there was something different in her eyes. Something warm and soft that made his breath catch. "I know," she said quietly. "I trust you, Thomas. Completely. You're the best person I've ever known." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Thomas wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her everything he'd been feeling for months. But before he could find the courage, Riley stirred and woke up, and the moment passed. Still, something had shifted between them. Over the next few weeks, Thomas noticed Candace touching his arm more when they talked, sitting closer to him during dinner, holding his gaze longer than necessary. Every interaction felt loaded with possibility. One evening in late April, Candace invited Thomas over for dinner as usual. But when he arrived, Riley wasn't there. "She's having a sleepover at Jessica's house," Candace explained, looking slightly nervous. "I thought maybe we could have an adult dinner for once. Talk without an 8-year-old interrupting every 5 seconds." "That sounds nice," Thomas said, trying to ignore the way his heart was racing. Candace had made his favorite meal, chicken parmesan with pasta and a salad. They ate by candlelight, talking about work and the foundation and everything except what they both seemed to be thinking about. After dinner, they moved to the couch with glasses of wine. The apartment was quiet without Riley's constant chatter, and Thomas was intensely aware of how close Candace was sitting, how good she smelled, how beautiful she looked in the soft lamplight. "Thomas," Candace said, setting down her wine glass. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why have you never dated anyone? In all the time I've known you, you've never mentioned going out with anyone or being interested in anyone." Thomas's mouth went dry. This was it. The moment he had been both hoping for and dreading. "There is someone I'm interested in," he said carefully. "But I haven't said anything because I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable or feel pressured." "Her?" Candace's voice was soft. Who is she? Thomas looked at her, at this incredible woman who had changed his entire life. It's you, Candace. It's always been you. I've been falling for you since the night you walked into my restaurant. But I didn't want to say anything because you work for me and I helped you get back on your feet and I didn't want you to feel obligated to feel the same way. Candace stared at him for a long moment, and Thomas felt his heart hammering in his chest. Had he just ruined everything? Had he misread all the signs? Then she smiled, a beautiful, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Thomas, I'm in love with you too. I have been for months. I kept waiting for you to say something, to give me some sign that you felt the same way. You love me? Thomas could hardly believe what he was hearing. Yes. How could I not? You're kind and generous and funny and you've been so good to Riley and me. You're everything I ever wanted but never thought I'd find. Thomas reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I don't want to rush you. We can take this as slowly as you need to. I don't want to go slowly, Candace said, moving closer to him. I've been waiting long enough. When they kissed, it felt like coming home. Like finding something Thomas hadn't even known he was searching for. Her lips were soft against his, and her hands came up to cup his face, and for the first time in his entire life, Thomas felt complete. They pulled apart, both smiling, both slightly breathless. I can't believe this is happening, Thomas said. Believe it, Candace replied, resting her forehead against his. We get our happy ending after all. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their relationship, about what it would mean, how they would navigate it. They agreed to keep things private at work, to be professional during business hours. They agreed to go slowly, introducing Thomas as Candace's boyfriend to Riley, even though the little girl already adored him. When Thomas finally left that night, floating on air, he stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the stars. His life had changed so completely in just 4 months. From lonely and isolated to loved and connected. All because of one chance encounter on Christmas Eve. He thought about his younger self, working so hard to build his business empire, sacrificing everything for success. If he could go back and tell that young man anything, it would be this. The real wealth is in the people you love, not the money you make. That's the only thing that truly matters. Thomas drove home to his mansion, but for the first time, it didn't feel empty. Because now he had Candace. He had Riley. He had a purpose and a direction and people who loved him for who he was, not what he had. Life was good. Better than good. Perfect. Spring bloomed into early summer, and with it came a new chapter in Thomas and Candace's relationship. They had been dating officially for 2 months, though they kept it quiet at work. Riley knew, of course, and was thrilled. She had started calling Thomas her almost dad, which made both adults tear up every time. The foundation was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. They had helped over 100 families find stable housing and employment. They had started a scholarship program for children from low-income families. They had partnered with local businesses to provide job training and placement services. Thomas found himself transformed by the work. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities to make a real difference. And having Candace by his side, both professionally and personally, made it all the more meaningful. One Saturday in June, Thomas took Candace and Riley to his mansion for a special surprise. He had been planning this for weeks and he could barely contain his excitement. Why are we going to your house? Riley asked from the back seat. We usually just hang out at our apartment on Saturdays. Because I have something to show you, Thomas said mysteriously. When they pulled up to the mansion, Riley's eyes went wide. She had been there a few times before, but it still impressed her every time. Come on, Thomas said, leading them through the house to the backyard. What had once been a perfectly manicured but sterile lawn was now transformed. Thomas had hired landscapers to install a play structure with swings and a slide. There was a sandbox and a small playhouse painted bright pink, Riley's favorite color. In the corner, there was even a basketball hoop adjusted to a child's height. Riley stood frozen, her mouth open in shock. Then she started to cry. Riley, baby, what's wrong? Candace asked, kneeling beside her daughter. It's too much, Riley sobbed. It's so nice. I don't deserve it. Thomas felt his own eyes fill with tears. He knelt down too, taking Riley's small hands in his. Riley, listen to me. You deserve this and so much more. You're an amazing kid. You're smart and funny and kind. You make me so happy every single day. This playground is just a small way of showing you how much I care about you. Really? Riley sniffled. Really? Do you like it? Riley launched herself at Thomas, wrapping her arms around his neck. I love it. I love you. I love you too, kiddo, Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. He looked up at Candace and saw tears streaming down her face too. She mouthed the words, "Thank you," and Thomas shook his head. He was the one who should be thanking her. She and Riley had given him a reason to be better, to do better, to want more from life than just success. Over the next few hours, Riley played on her new equipment while Thomas and Candace watched from lawn chairs, holding hands. "You didn't have to do this," Candace said softly. "I wanted to. I want you both to feel comfortable here. This is going to be your home too someday." Candace turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "Thomas? I'm not proposing right now," he said quickly. "I know it's still early, but I'm telling you my intentions. I want a future with you, Candace. With you and Riley. I want us to be a real family." "I want that too," Candace said, squeezing his hand. "More than anything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Riley explore every inch of her new playground. Thomas thought about how far they had all come. How much had changed since that Christmas Eve when two desperate people had walked into his restaurant seeking warmth. The foundation work continued to expand through the summer. Thomas and Candace decided to open a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. It would offer after-school programs for kids, job training for adults, health services, and a food pantry. It was ambitious, but they were both committed to making it happen. The construction and planning kept them busy, but they always made time for family dinners and weekend activities with Riley. Thomas had never been happier. His life had purpose beyond just making money. He was making a real difference in people's lives. In July, the community center held its grand opening. Hundreds of people from the neighborhood came out to celebrate. There were games for kids, free food, and tours of the new facility. Thomas gave a speech thanking everyone who had helped make the center possible, but he kept it short because he knew the real star of the day was Candace. She spoke about how the center represented hope and opportunity. She talked about her own journey from homelessness to stability, and how she wanted to ensure that others had access to the same kind of help she had received. "This center isn't just a building," Candace said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "It's a promise. A promise that we see you, we value you, and we're here to support you. No one should have to struggle alone. We're all in this together." The applause was deafening. Thomas watched Candace with pride and love swelling in his chest. She was extraordinary, and somehow, impossibly, she loved him back. After the opening ceremony, as they were walking through the center checking on different activities, a woman approached them. She was young, maybe early 20s, with a small child holding her hand. "Excuse me," the woman said nervously. "Are you Thomas Bradford?" "I am," Thomas said with a friendly smile. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your foundation helped me find a job in childcare for my son. I've been working at a daycare center for 3 months now, and I just got a raise. I'm finally able to save money and plan for the future. You changed my life." Thomas felt emotion well up in his throat. "I'm so glad we could help. Keep up the good work." After the woman left, Candace took Thomas's hand. "Do you see? This is what it's all about. These real people, these real lives that we're touching. This is more valuable than any amount of money." "I know," Thomas said. "You taught me that." They spent the rest of the summer building their relationship and their work. Thomas officially promoted Candace to Director of Community Programs, a role that came with more responsibility and a significant raise. She had earned it through her dedication and vision, but Thomas was careful to ensure that everyone knew the promotion was based on merit, not their relationship. In August, Riley turned 9. Thomas threw her a huge birthday party at his mansion, inviting all her friends from school. There were bounce houses and a magician and more cake than anyone could eat. Riley was glowing with happiness, and watching her laugh and play with her friends, Thomas felt overwhelming gratitude for the life he now had. That night, after all the guests had left and Riley had fallen asleep in one of the guest rooms, Thomas and Candace sat on his back patio under the stars. "She had a great day," Candace said, leaning against Thomas's shoulder. "She deserves every bit of happiness," Thomas replied. "Both of you do. You've given us so much," Candace said softly. "More than I ever thought possible. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "It's real," Thomas assured her. "And it's just the beginning. We have so much more ahead of us." He thought about the ring he had hidden in his bedroom upstairs. He had bought it a month ago, planning to propose on Christmas Eve, making the anniversary of when they first met extra special. He hadn't told anyone yet, wanted it to be a complete surprise. But sitting there with Candace in his arms, looking out at the backyard where Riley's playground stood, Thomas felt certain. This was his family. These were the people he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. And he couldn't wait to make it official. September brought cooler weather and new challenges. The foundation was growing faster than anticipated, which was wonderful but also demanding. Thomas and Candace found themselves working longer hours, coordinating programs, meeting with donors, and handling the inevitable complications that came with rapid expansion. But they made sure to protect their family time. No matter how busy they got, they had dinner together at least 3 nights a week. They attended Riley's school events together. They took weekend trips to nearby parks and museums. They were building a life, not just running a business. One evening in mid-September, as they were having dinner at Thomas's house, Riley made an announcement. "We have a family tree project at school," she said. "We have to bring in pictures and information about our family." Thomas saw Candace tense slightly. This was complicated territory. Riley's father hadn't been in her life for years, and the family tree was essentially just Candace and Riley. "That sounds like a fun project," Candace said carefully. "We'll find some pictures of you and me and maybe some of your grandparents before they passed away." "Can I put Thomas on my family tree?" Riley asked. "He's part of our family, isn't he?" Thomas and Candace exchanged glances. They hadn't really discussed how to define their relationship to Riley. Boyfriend and girlfriend seemed too casual for what they had, but they weren't married either. "Of course Thomas is part of our family," Candace said. "But maybe we should talk to your teacher first, make sure it's okay to include people who aren't blood relatives." "Mrs. Anderson said family is the people who love you and take care of you," Riley said with the simple wisdom of a child. "So that's Thomas." Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I would be honored to be on your family tree, Riley." That night, after Riley had gone to bed, Thomas and Candace talked about the family tree incident. "She thinks of you as her father," Candace said. "You know that, right?" "I think of her as my daughter," Thomas replied. "And I think of you as, well, as the woman I want to spend my life with." Candace smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. But soon." Thomas kissed her hand. "I want to do it right. Make it special. Something you'll both remember forever." "I already know my answer," Candace said softly. "Good. That makes the planning less stressful." They laughed together, and Thomas marveled at how easy it was to be with her. How natural their relationship felt. He had spent so many years alone, convinced that he was meant to live that way, and now he couldn't imagine going back to that emptiness. The foundation work continued to be fulfilling and demanding. In October, they launched a new initiative providing microloans to small businesses owned by women and minorities. Thomas had always believed in entrepreneurship, and he wanted to help others achieve the kind of success he had found. Candace ran the program, reviewing applications and meeting with hopeful business owners. She had a gift for seeing potential in people, for understanding what they needed to succeed. Thomas watched her work with admiration and love, knowing that she was making a real difference every single day. One Saturday in late October, Thomas took Candace and Riley to a pumpkin patch outside the city. They picked pumpkins for carving, went on a hay ride, and got lost in a corn maze together. Riley was in heaven, running ahead and calling back for them to hurry up. As they walked through the corn maze, with Riley about 20 feet ahead exploring, Candace slipped her hand into Thomas's. "I have something to tell you," she said, sounding nervous. Thomas's heart skipped. "What is it?" "I got my GED results back. I passed. And I've been accepted into a community college program starting in January. Social work degree like I always wanted." Thomas stopped walking and pulled her into a hug. "Candace, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You gave me the stability to dream again. To believe I could be more than just a survivor." "You've always been more than that," Thomas said firmly. "You're extraordinary. And you're going to be an incredible social worker." They kissed in the middle of the corn maze, and Thomas felt overwhelming happiness. This was what life was supposed to be. Supporting each other, celebrating victories, building toward shared goals. When they finally made it out of the maze, Riley was waiting impatiently by the exit. "What took you guys so long?" she demanded. "We got lost," Thomas said with a grin. "You're supposed to be good at directions," Riley said, rolling her eyes in that way 9-year-olds do. "Adults are supposed to know these things." "Even adults get lost sometimes," Candace said, but she was looking at Thomas when she said it, and he knew she was talking about more than just the corn maze. November arrived with the first snow of the season. Riley was ecstatic, running outside in her new pink coat to catch snowflakes on her tongue. Thomas and Candace watched from the window of his mansion, their arms around each other. "1 year," Thomas said softly. "1 year since you and Riley walked into my restaurant." "Best thing that ever happened to me," Candace replied. "To all of us." "I agree." Thomas kissed the top of her head. And I'm going to make sure this Christmas is even better than last year. He had the whole thing planned out. He would propose on Christmas Eve exactly 1 year after they met. He had already talked to Riley about it, asking for her blessing. She had cried with happiness and then made him promise she could be the flower girl at the wedding. Everything was falling into place. His life, once so empty and meaningless, was now full of love and purpose. Thomas looked at the snow falling outside and thought about how much could change in just 1 year. How one act of kindness, one decision to help someone in need, could transform everything. He was ready for the next chapter. Ready to make Candace his wife, to officially become Riley's father, to build the family he had always wanted but never believed he could have. December would bring new beginnings, a proposal, and hopefully, a yes that would make his life complete. The first week of December brought unexpected complications. Thomas had been so focused on his personal happiness and the foundation work that he hadn't been paying attention to his business rivals. That was a mistake. Preston Hughes was a real estate developer who had lost several major deals to Thomas over the years. He was known for being ruthless and vindictive, the kind of man who held grudges and looked for any opportunity to hurt his competition. When photos of Thomas with Candace and Riley appeared in a local newspaper article about the foundation, Preston saw an opportunity. He started spreading rumors, subtle at first, suggesting that Thomas's relationship with Candace was inappropriate given their employer-employee relationship. He implied that Thomas had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman, that the whole foundation was just a publicity stunt to cover up unethical behavior. At first, Thomas dismissed the rumors as jealous gossip. But then a reporter from a major newspaper called, asking for a comment about allegations that he had used his position of power to coerce Candace into a relationship. Thomas was shocked and angry. "That's absolutely not true," he told the reporter. "My relationship with Candace is genuine and based on mutual respect and love. She is not and has never been coerced or pressured in any way." But the damage was starting to spread. Social media picked up on the story, and suddenly there were debates online about power dynamics and whether their relationship was appropriate. Some people defended them, sharing their story of how Thomas had helped Candace when she was homeless. Others were more skeptical, questioning his motives. Candace was devastated. She had never wanted to be the subject of public scrutiny, had never asked for any of this attention. When Thomas came to her apartment one evening after a particularly rough day of media coverage, he found her crying. "I'm ruining your reputation," she said. "Everyone thinks you took advantage of me. They think I'm some kind of gold digger who seduced my way into your life." "That's not true, and anyone who knows us knows that," Thomas said, pulling her into his arms. "This will blow over. We just have to be patient." "What if it doesn't? What if this affects the foundation? All those people we're helping, they shouldn't suffer because of me." "They won't. I won't let that happen." But Thomas was more worried than he let on. Preston Hughes was clearly behind the rumors, but he was being careful to keep his involvement hidden. And the media loved a controversial story, especially one involving a billionaire and a woman he had rescued from homelessness. The next day, Thomas's lawyer called with more bad news. Several major donors to the foundation were asking questions, expressing concern about the optics of his relationship with Candace. One donor had even threatened to pull their funding if Thomas didn't address the situation publicly. Thomas called an emergency meeting with his public relations team. They recommended that he and Candace take a step back from their public-facing roles at the foundation temporarily, until the controversy died down. "Absolutely not," Thomas said firmly. "We're not going to hide like we've done something wrong. We're going to face this head-on." His PR director looked concerned. "Mr. Bradford, I understand your position, but we need to think strategically here. Sometimes the best move is to let things cool off before addressing them directly." "No. I'm not giving Preston Hughes or anyone else the satisfaction of making us retreat. We're going to tell our story, the true story, and people will either believe us or they won't. But we're not going to act like we're ashamed of our relationship." That evening, Thomas gathered Candace and Riley at his house. It was time to tell Riley what was happening. She was old enough to understand that people were saying mean things about her mom and Thomas, and she deserved to hear the truth from them. "Riley, there are some people who are saying not nice things about Mommy and me," Thomas explained gently. "They're saying that our relationship isn't real, that I only helped your mom because I wanted something from her." "That's stupid," Riley said with the blunt honesty of a 9-year-old. "You love each other. Anyone can see that. You're right, we do love each other. But sometimes people make up stories or believe bad things about others. We just wanted you to know what's being said in case you hear about it at school or from other kids. Are you and Mommy going to break up because of these mean people?" Riley asked, her voice small and scared. No, Thomas and Candace said in unison. Never, Thomas added firmly. Some gossip and lies aren't going to change how we feel about each other. We're a family and families stick together no matter what. Riley seemed satisfied with this answer. She hugged both of them and went back to playing with her toys. But Thomas could see the worry in Candace's eyes. I should quit my job, she said after Riley was out of earshot. I should step away from the foundation. That would stop the rumors about me using you for your money or your position. No, Thomas said firmly. You're not quitting. You're brilliant at what you do and the foundation needs you. We're going to fight this together. How? Candace asked, her voice breaking. How do we fight rumors and lies? With the truth, Thomas said. And with our actions. We keep doing good work. We keep helping people. We show everyone that our relationship is real and based on genuine love and respect. Eventually, the truth will win out. Are you still with us? If this story has captured your heart, please take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue sharing stories about kindness, love, and hope. The next few weeks were difficult. The media attention intensified, with more articles and social media posts questioning Thomas and Candace's relationship. Some people came to their defense, sharing testimonials about how the foundation had helped them. But the negative voices were louder, drowning out the positive stories. Thomas hired a private investigator to dig into Preston Hughes's involvement. He needed proof that his rival was behind the smear campaign. Meanwhile, he and Candace continued their work at the foundation, refusing to hide or back down. One afternoon in mid-December, just over a week before Christmas, Thomas's investigator called with good news. I found it, he said. Emails between Hughes and the reporter who wrote the first negative article. Hughes paid him to write the story and provided false information. I also found evidence that Hughes has been posting negative comments on social media under fake accounts. Can we use this? Thomas asked. Absolutely. This is defamation. You have grounds for a lawsuit. And more importantly, you can expose what he's been doing. Thomas felt a mix of relief and anger. He had been right about Preston Hughes, but knowing his suspicions were correct didn't make the situation any less painful. The damage had already been done to his and Candace's reputations. He called his lawyer and his PR team. They worked late into the night crafting a response. Thomas would hold a press conference, present the evidence of Hughes's involvement, and set the record straight about his relationship with Candace. But he had one more important thing to do first. He called Candace and asked her to come to his house. When she arrived, looking exhausted from the stress of the past few weeks, Thomas led her to the living room where the fireplace was blazing. I know the timing isn't perfect, Thomas said, taking both her hands in his. I had planned to wait until Christmas Eve to make it exactly 1 year since we met. But I can't wait anymore. I need you to know beyond any doubt that you are the most important person in my life. That I'm committed to you and to our future together, no matter what anyone says or thinks. He got down on one knee and Candace gasped, tears already forming in her eyes. Candace Johnson, you walked into my life when I was at my lowest, when I thought I was destined to be alone forever. You and Riley showed me what really matters in life. You taught me about love and family and purpose. You made me want to be a better person. Will you marry me? He pulled out the ring, a beautiful diamond that caught the firelight and sparkled like stars. Candace was crying openly now, but she was also smiling. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up, pulling her into his arms. They kissed, both of them crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed with emotion and relief and love. I love you so much, Candace whispered against his lips. I can't believe this is real. It's real, Thomas promised. And tomorrow we're going to show the whole world just how real it is. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning at 10 a.m. Thomas had invited all the major media outlets, promising a significant announcement about the recent controversy. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Thomas stood at the podium looking confident and calm. Beside him stood Candace, wearing a green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, her engagement ring visible on her left hand. His lawyer and PR team stood nearby, ready to support them. Thank you all for coming, Thomas began. I've called this press conference to address the recent allegations and rumors about my relationship with Candace Johnson, and to reveal the truth about who has been spreading these false stories. He proceeded to lay out the evidence his investigator had found. Emails, financial records, social media posts, everything pointing to Preston Hughes as the source of the smear campaign. He explained how Hughes had paid for negative articles, spread lies on social media, and deliberately tried to damage Thomas's reputation and the foundation's work. Preston Hughes has been my business rival for years, Thomas said. He's lost deals to me in the past, and apparently he decided that attacking my personal life was an acceptable form of revenge. It's not. What he's done is defamation, and my lawyers will be filing a lawsuit against him shortly. The room buzzed with conversation. Reporters were typing furiously on their laptops. Camera flashes went off constantly. Thomas waited for the noise to die down before continuing. But more importantly, I want to set the record straight about my relationship with Candace. Yes, she works for my company. Yes, I helped her when she was going through a difficult time. But our relationship is not inappropriate or unethical. It's based on genuine love and mutual respect. He turned to look at Candace, who smiled at him with tears in her eyes. 1 year ago today, minus a few days, Candace and her daughter Riley walked into my restaurant on Christmas Eve. They were cold and homeless and just needed a warm place to rest. I could have turned them away. I could have given them a meal and sent them on their way. But something made me want to help more. And in helping them, they helped me too. Thomas's voice grew thick with emotion, but he pushed through. I had spent years building wealth but had forgotten to build a life. I was lonely and isolated, surrounded by money but no love. Candace and Riley changed that. They showed me what really matters. They gave me a reason to use my resources for good instead of just accumulating more. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. Our foundation was born from that encounter. Every family we've helped, every life we've touched, it all started because two desperate people walked into my restaurant and I chose to see them as human beings who needed help, not as problems to be ignored. Candace stepped forward then, taking the microphone. Her hands shook slightly but her voice was strong. I want to address the accusations that I used Thomas for his money or position. When I met Thomas, I was at the lowest point of my life. I was homeless with my daughter, scared and desperate. Thomas offered help with no strings attached. He gave me a job because he believed in my abilities, not because of any relationship between us. Our romantic relationship developed over months, naturally and honestly. She looked at Thomas with such love that the whole room seemed to feel it. Thomas Bradford is the kindest, most generous person I've ever known. He didn't have to help us, but he did. He didn't have to create a foundation to help others, but he did. He didn't have to open his heart to me and my daughter, but he did. And yesterday he asked me to marry him. I said yes because I love him and because he's the partner and father figure Riley and I have always needed. The room erupted with questions, but Thomas held up his hand. We'll take a few questions, but I want to make one thing clear first. I don't care what Preston Hughes or anyone else says about us. I love Candace and Riley. They're my family. And I'm not going to apologize for that or hide it or pretend to be ashamed. Love is something to celebrate, not to attack. The questions came fast and furious. Reporters wanted to know about the engagement, about the foundation, about Thomas's plans for legal action against Hughes. Thomas and Candace answered everything honestly and openly, presenting a united front. By the time the press conference ended, the narrative had completely shifted. Social media exploded with support for Thomas and Candace. People shared the video of their statements, praising their love story and condemning Preston Hughes for his cruel tactics. Major news outlets ran stories about the Christmas miracle that had led to both a beautiful relationship and a foundation helping hundreds of families. Preston Hughes issued a statement denying all involvement, but the evidence was too strong. Within days, his business partners began distancing themselves from him. Several of his investors pulled their funding. His reputation, which he had tried so hard to destroy Thomas's, was ruined instead. As Christmas approached, Thomas and Candace threw themselves into planning a small engagement celebration and continuing their work with the foundation. The controversy had actually increased awareness of their mission, leading to more donations and volunteer offers than ever before. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after they first met, Thomas took Candace and Riley back to the Sterling Room. He had arranged for the restaurant to close early so it could be just the three of them, recreating that first night but with so much more warmth and love. They sat at the same table where Candace and Riley had first warmed up with hot chocolate. Antoine prepared a special dinner for them, and they talked and laughed and remembered how far they had come. 1 year ago, I was sitting here alone, feeling sorry for myself, Thomas said. And then you walked through that door and changed everything. We were so scared that night, Candace remembered. I almost didn't come in. I almost kept walking, trying to find somewhere else to go. But Riley was so cold and I saw the lights and something made me open that door. I'm so glad you did, Thomas said softly. Riley, who had been listening to their conversation, spoke up. "I think it was meant to be. I think we were supposed to find Thomas and he was supposed to find us. Like it was magic or something." "Maybe it was magic," Candace said, reaching over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "The magic of kindness and love and hope." After dinner, Thomas had one more surprise. He led them upstairs to the apartment where Candace and Riley had stayed that first night. But now it was transformed, decorated for Christmas with a tree in the corner and presents underneath. "I wanted to give Riley a proper Christmas this year," Thomas explained. "One with all the things she deserves." Riley's face lit up like the Christmas tree as she ran to the presents. There were toys and books and clothes, but also some practical things like a new backpack for school and art supplies for her projects. Each gift was chosen with care, showing how well Thomas knew and understood her. As Riley opened her gifts, exclaiming over each one, Thomas and Candace sat together on the couch, holding hands and watching her joy. "This is perfect," Candace whispered. "This is everything I ever wanted." "Me too," Thomas agreed. "I've spent my whole life chasing success and wealth, thinking that would make me happy. But this, right here, this is what happiness actually is. Family. Love. Connection. Purpose." Later, after Riley had fallen asleep surrounded by her new toys, Thomas and Candace went out onto the balcony. The city stretched out below them, decorated with Christmas lights and looking magical in the winter night. "I want to get married soon," Thomas said suddenly. "I don't want a long engagement. I want you to be my wife, and I want to be Riley's father, officially and completely." "I want that too," Candace said. "How about Valentine's Day? That gives us almost 2 months to plan something small and beautiful." "Perfect," Thomas agreed, pulling her close. They stood there together, looking out at the city, thinking about the past year and the future ahead. So much had changed. So many lives had been touched and transformed, starting with their own. The foundation continued to grow and thrive. Within 2 years, they would help over 1,000 families find stable housing and employment. They would open 3 more community centers. They would start scholarship programs and job training initiatives and health clinics. But all of that success, all of that good work, had started with one simple act of kindness on a cold Christmas Eve. When Thomas had chosen to see 2 strangers not as problems or interruptions, but as human beings who needed help. When he had decided to open his heart and his resources to people who had nothing to offer him in return except their humanity. And in helping them he had saved himself. He had found the family and love and purpose that had been missing from his life. He had learned that true wealth isn't measured in money or property or business success, but in the connections you make and the lives you touch and the love you share. As they stood on that balcony on Christmas Eve, 1 year after everything changed, Thomas and Candace held each other close and looked toward a future bright with possibility. They had each other. They had Riley. They had work that mattered and love that sustained them. They had found their happy ending, but really, it was just the beginning. The beginning of a life built on kindness and hope and love. The beginning of a family forged not by blood but by choice and commitment and mutual care. The beginning of a story that would inspire others to open their hearts and help those in need. Because that's what love does. Transforms everything. It turns loneliness into connection, despair into hope, emptiness into fullness. It saves us from ourselves and shows us who we can become. Thomas kissed Candace under the stars, feeling grateful beyond measure for the gift she and Riley had given him. The gift of a second chance. The gift of family. The gift of love. "Merry Christmas," he whispered. "Merry Christmas," she whispered back. "To us. To our family. To all the Christmases ahead." And somewhere in the apartment behind them, Riley slept peacefully, surrounded by presents and love, dreaming happy dreams about the father who had chosen her and the future they would all share together. 1 year. 1 chance encounter. 1 act of kindness. That's all it took to change 3 lives forever. To prove that hope is never lost, that love is always possible, and that sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the simplest packages. A cold night. A warm restaurant. 2 desperate people and 1 lonely man. The ingredients for a Christmas miracle, a love story and a lifetime of happiness. The end was really just the beginning. And what a beautiful beginning it was.